Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nathan Sampson. The topic of my presentation today is the modern American literary period, a short overview of the first half of the 20th century, the historical time period itself, in which the modern American literary period takes place, and then I'll look at a major literary hero of the period in a story by John Steinbeck. The reason this presentation, this audiovisual presentation, can be helpful to you is that it might give you ideas for implementing your own audio visual presentation in the classes that you teach. We're going to talk about three things. Firstly, I'll go over the modern American literary period and two of its main authors of that period, John Steinbeck and Ernest Hemingway. Secondly, I'll discuss the historical time period itself. And finally, we'll look at a hero from John Steinbeck's story, The Pearl. That character is named Kino. Firstly, let me summarize the modern period in American literature by comparing John Steinbeck and Ernest Hemingway. Both authors use similar conventions in that the heroic characters are usually underdogs in society, such as the old fisherman who has not caught a fish in quite some time, in what seems to be eons, in a story by Ernest Hemingway called The Old Man and the Sea. Then there's Kino from John Steinbeck's The Pearl, an exploited and poor indigenous Indian living in the area that was originally colonized by the Spanish. In addition, many of their works are novellas, which is shorter than a novel but longer than a fable or tale. So they kind of write short stories many times, but they also wrote long stories as well. This form of short story contains, as it were, their styles, with swift moving dialogue between characters and a fast paced, fast moving stories. Before you know it, you are already transported to another scene, another time, another place. Neither author has their characters linger in one place for very long. This way of telling a fast paced story is germane to the modern period in American literature, a reflection of 20th century society, which had sped up considerably from the preceding century and centuries that preceded the 19th century. Um, with airplanes and monopolies and telephones, it really speeded up life quite a bit. And their fast paced moving novellas or stories seem to reflect that way of life in the 20th century. A theme that we are living in a world of abundance amidst poverty is a recurring theme in their works. All this wealth, and yet we have suffering and alienation, are constant themes, time and again, in their works. The philosophical message, therefore, is that in their works is that the underdog struggles against mighty odds, against the powers that be, only to have the best laid plans of mice and men go awry. So it seems like the little guy struggles and struggles and struggles, but he cannot, all right, succeed. Often the heroes do not succeed and they experience a tragedy at the end of the story, even though they do not perish or die themselves. Let me move on to the second point, which is about the historical period. There are, as I see it, five main periods of the first half of the 20th century. The first two decades witnessed the movement towards mergers and monopolies, also known as trustification, whereby the smaller companies entrusted their cash and assets to the larger company that became a trust or a monopoly. This led to World War I, 1914 and 1918, because these trusts needed an expanding market for the massive surplus of goods they produced. Could not sell everything in the home market. World War I, an imperialist war, led to a redivision of the world's markets, which paved the way for the roaring 20s in America, a decade of unparalleled prosperity. But this in turn paved the way for a period of economic bust, the Great Depression, in which at least a third of the American class was out of work. World War II, 1941 to 1945, got America out of the Great Depression as the economy geared itself towards wartime production. This, in a nutshell, is a summary overview of the five major periods in the first half of the 20th century, the historical time period in which John Steinbeck and Ernest Hemingway wrote their novels and novellas. Lastly, I'll move on to the third point, which is about Kino, the hero and the father in John Steinbeck's novella, The Pearl. He has heroic attributes. One attribute is the fact that his responses are usually instinctive, predictable, and inevitable. Steinbeck wrote, quote, Kino stood perfectly still. He could hear Juana whispering the old magic again, and he could hear the evil music of the enemy. He could not move until the scorpion moved, and it felt for the source of death that was coming into it. Kino's hand went forward very slowly, very smoothly. The thorn tail jerked upright, and at that moment the laughing Coyotito shook the rope, and the scorpion fell. Kino's hand leaped to catch it, but it fell past his fingers, fell on the baby's shoulder, landed, and struck. Then, snarling, Kino had it in his fingers, rubbing it to a paste in his hands. End of quote. Regarding a second attribute of Kino's, the fact that he is willing to accept challenges and even court disaster, Steinbeck wrote, quote, "But now, by saying what his future was to be like, he had created it. A plan is a real thing, and things projected are experienced. A plan once made and visualized becomes a reality along with other realities, never to be destroyed but easily to be attacked. Thus, Kino's future was real, but having set it up, other forces were set up to destroy it. And this he knew, so that he had to prepare to meet the attack. And this Kino knew also, that the gods do not love men's plans, and the gods do not love success unless it comes by accident. He knew that the gods take their revenge on a man if he be successful through his own efforts. Consequently, Kino was afraid of plans, but having made one, he could never destroy it. And to meet the attack, Kino was already making a hard skin for himself against the world. His eyes and his mind probed for danger before it appeared." End of quote. In conclusion, in this presentation, my objectives were 1. A summary overview of the modern American literary period, 2. The 5 major time periods of the first half of the 20th century, and 3. The heroic attributes, 2 heroic attributes of Kino, the hero of John Steinbeck's novella. So I've covered those 3 points: the American literary period, the 5 major time periods of the first half of the 20th century, and then the heroic attributes of John Steinbeck's main character, Kino, in The Pearl. Are there any questions? Thank you.